Hi and welcome. My name is Emily Mason, and I will be giving my report on the effects of acceleration in advanced learners. This was something that really resonated with me over the past year, but also really reflecting on my own life and realizing that I was probably a student that needed to be accelerated or challenged in different ways, and how I can use what I know now to make a difference in a child's life. So this action research project took place over the last year of me being at Arkansas State, and I really wanted to look at how acceleration in advanced learners is a topic that can really look at emotional, social, and intellectual implications that go with being a student and being moved from one classroom to the next, and whether or not those social adaptations, intellectual areas of growth, and emotional growth can be beneficial or not for a student interacting with peers of an unlike age. There has been many years of research on this topic, and there's no clear line as to whether advancement has a negative or positive effect, because each child's different. We have to evaluate each child and determine whether advancement's the correct choice. A reference that I really loved while doing this assignment came from a researcher named Hargrove, who referenced a film that took place in my home state of Iowa called Field of Dreams. In the second paragraph of her paper, it states, "If we as teachers of the gifted do as we say we do and teach higher order thinking skills, and if we do it capably, our students begin to apply these skills." So, if this is true, then I guess when it comes to accelerated students, do they need to be moved from the classroom? Do they just need higher order thinking skills? Can we make the information we're teaching relevant yet still challenging? I believe we can for some students. Some students may need to be challenged always, but just not accelerated. By building the foundation, the learning will come. So my hypothesis: accelerating the learning for a child of a younger age, but who is academically ready for more advanced skills, will not hinder their social growth and will positively influence their academic growth. My research question that I started with was, how can I accelerate learning for accelerated students while providing age-appropriate social and emotional interaction? So we're going to see if this worked. During my first week, this is when I did my initial classroom observation and gave my pre-assessment. So my first week started March 9th. I entered the classroom. I observed the structure and routine that the teacher had in place. I wanted to make sure I was being respectful of her space and her time. I stayed from 9 a.m. to 11:30 each day. I found out that breakfast was served at 8:15 in this particular Head Start classroom, and lunch was served at 11:30. So coming from 9 to 11:30 was a great time period to observe. After the 11:30 lunchtime, they took a nap, had snack, and then it was time to go home. I returned again on March 10th and started really interacting with the children. I focused on the one child, but I made sure to integrate myself into the room and become familiar with more than just that child. I didn't want to be the shiny object in the room. On March 11th, I was able to evaluate the child during the class time, and on March 12th, I stayed home to study the data that had been obtained the previous day and started researching some intervention strategies that I thought might be beneficial for the student. I didn't know the student extremely well, so I felt like I had to have a plethora of intervention strategies, because we all know what works on Monday is not going to work on Tuesday. When I returned March 13th, I spoke with the teacher in the afternoon and during nap time about the interventions and the assessments. The teacher was cooperative, with the suggestions, and she allowed me to do the interventions during their group activity time. She was also willing to make sure that the parent understood what was happening each week, since she saw the parent at pickup, as well as taking the intervention strategies to the parent so they could work on those at home. Week 2 brought the time for really diving into interventions. So this took place March 16th through the 20th. I focused on the intervention strategies that I had targeted based off of the data that I had obtained the previous week, and used about 15-minute chunks of time during their activity time to incorporate some new centers into their free play time, and this helped lend into the interventions. I wanted to make sure that I was also giving time for social and emotional growth. And for that to happen, the child needed to be around students of a higher age level. So if I pulled him out and just did the interventions with him and I, then I was not going to succeed in the second part of the strategy. So by creating interventions that could be pushed into group time that I was able to observe, participate in, and then evaluate, with all of the other children also interacting during that time, that lent to emotional growth. On Monday, we addressed shapes. We made shapes in the sand and out of Play-Doh, and then I created a center for shapes that could be played on Tuesday. Just little cards that they rolled the Play-Doh and placed it around the shape. This was also fine and gross motor skills, so I was able to observe those as well. So I observed how the student interacted with others and how the other students interacted with him. I was also able to see the specific student playing with the shapes and centers and building upon their knowledge of shapes while also interacting with other kids. On Wednesday, I introduced colors. We used the shapes that we had previously used in the centers, and then talked about colors of those shapes and how they were different colors and how we could categorize them and sort them. So triangles all went together, but triangles aren't all the same color. So now we sorted them by shape, now let's sort them by color. So then on Thursday, we played a matching game that incorporated the shapes and the colors on felt boards, that they were able to put all the triangles in one area and then change it to all the colors in one area, the same as what we had done the previous day in the small group, but now on a felt board. On Friday, we started to introduce the alphabet in upper case and learned about the names of the letters. This child had a fairly good grasp on names of letters, but I noticed that other students in the classroom did not. And so he would become an asset to those students as he picked up more and more letters and understood how to identify those letters. The other students would also catch on and start to identify those letters as well. I reported to the teacher on Friday about what I had observed during the free play time, and she was able to effectively communicate that with the parent. Week 3 was interventions continued. So in week 3, this was March 23rd through March 27th, we continued to talk about letters, did a floor puzzle together on Monday, and on Tuesday, I was able to witness the students working together to recreate that puzzle during their free play time. They were able to look up at letter charts that were on the wall and know what letters came next. I observed the specific student interacting and contributing to the conversation. So he would say, no, that doesn't go there, or next we need, and talk about a specific letter. On Wednesday, we incorporated lowercase letters, and we worked on matching the lowercase letter to its uppercase friend. And we worked on a floor puzzle again by matching upper and lowercase, and then on Thursday, they were able to independently practice that as a class or a group during their free play time. On Friday, we worked on counting objects. We used the game of Barrel of Monkeys to count how many monkeys we could hook together on the tree, and that helped work on the rote counting, but also how to count objects and things like that. And so on Friday, the teacher reported back to the parent what had happened during the week and the intervention strategies used. so the parent could also incorporate that at home. Week 4 was post-observations and post-assessments. So March 30th through April 3rd, on Monday and Tuesday, I again just stepped back and really started observing. The children were given a choice of what they wanted to play, and I watched and interacted as needed. The students were excited to talk to each other, they were correcting one another, and helping one another when someone got stuck or confused during a specific intervention free play time. The specific students, that specific student was engaged much more frequently with their peers than they were at the beginning of this research project, and he was establishing new skills and confidence that I hadn't seen before. On Wednesday and Thursday, I assessed the students' skills during doing a post-test of the same pre-test that I had done, and I took these assessments home and analyzed them on Friday. I went in Friday afternoon during nap time, reported to the teacher my observations and my findings, some suggestions that I thought I would come up with some ideas for her with intervention strategies, and what we could do to communicate effectively with this parent. The next week, I was able to start analyzing my data more closely and really getting pinpointed data. After analyzing the assessments on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, I created graphs and charts from the data that I had obtained during both the pre and post assessments. Then I created intervention plans and assessments that the teacher could incorporate if she so chose into her free play time that allowed the children to build upon their new skills, while also working cooperatively to gain social knowledge. During nap time on Friday, I took those in, and she was able to look them over and determine whether or not she would use them during this time, and then send some information home with the parent as well, so they had effective intervention strategies at home. So this is the pre-assessment that I used, and this targets there's some standards and preschool skills. There's the post one as well. And you can see, compared to the two, that you can already see growth, but we needed to make sure that we had exact growth. So that's what we'll be looking at during the data analysis. So one concern that the teacher had was that this specific center used GOLD teaching strategies to assess. And my assessment was not a particular GOLD teaching strategy assessment. And so I was able to go in, show her the first part of the assessment was shapes. So that's Iowa Standard 7.3.PS.2, which relates back to GOLD Standard 21. Colors is 7.4.PS.1, Gold Standard 13. Capital letters is 6.2.PS.7, Gold Standard 16. During this time, I also showed the teacher that on the Iowa website, there is a document that correlates Iowa teaching standards to the GOLD teaching standards. And she can press Command F on her laptop, type in the keyword such as letter sounds that she's looking for, and it pops right up with the Iowa standard, but also the GOLD standard. So even if she's not using a GOLD teaching strategy worksheet or item, she can still assess that by looking up the standard, by looking up the keyword of the assessment that she just did. So here's the graph for the pretest. We have shapes. He got a 6 out of 8. Colors, a 5. Capital letters, a 12. Like I said, he had a firm grasp on capital letters. Lowercase, 8. Letter sounds were more tricky. So he had 2. He knew his letter name, and he knew, I believe, the letter I want to say S for snake. So they had just gotten done with a snake unit. And so that was nice to be able to see he had recalled some of that knowledge. Numbers, he was able to identify, pulling out, 8 numbers, counting. He could rote count to 5. He kept skipping 3, which was curious to me. So I made sure that I communicated that with the teacher, that he kept calling 3E. And she was able to document that just to keep an eye on it. And patterns were a relatively new thing. So I knew I needed to focus on letter sounds and patterns, but also some of these other key elements could be tied in to letter sounds and patterns. I also had to look at social emotional. So that's why I really chose this assessment, because it did focus on social emotional right in that assessment. And again, I was able to go to the document that tied GOLD and the Iowa standards together and see that interactions is 1.4.ps.1, GOLD standard 2. Group participation 1.4.ps.3, GOLD standard 3. Rules and respect 1.2.ps.4, GOLD standard 1B.6. So knowing how to do that is really going to save myself time, but also the teacher time as she comes up with new assessments that are quick and might not be as time consuming as the GOLD assessments. So here's the post assessment. We can already see a growth. I already see that this child has grown at least by 1 to 2 in every single category. And that to me shows the positivity of being in this accelerated classroom with students of a different age that are learning at a different caliber than maybe this child was previously learning in his previous classroom. Post-assessments. So when we looked at the graph previously, here's a breakdown of those numbers. I wanted to show them side by side first so you could see the growth, but you can see that 17 capital letters compared to 12 initially. So definitely showed some good growth over essentially a 3-week time period. And then here's the pre-assessment for the social emotional assessment results. So these are just things that I witnessed and could easily record during this time. How he did at cleanup, how he did during group time. The one thing that I was taken aback by was interactions. He wasn't sad to be there. He wasn't upset to be there. He just didn't talk to anybody, didn't have any interactions, didn't really care if anybody talked to him. He was content just hanging out by himself and doing his own thing. So here's the post-assessment. So for social emotional, I went ahead and documented that each week because it was easy just to make tally marks of interactions that I saw taking place, group participation that I saw taking place, rules. The one thing I noticed, interactions grew tremendously from 0 interactions the first week to 6 by the 4th week, essentially. But sharing during week 3 did not want to share at all. And that to me just goes to show that kids are curious creatures just like adults, and we have our bad days and our bad moments and we just want to be left alone time. And encouraging those, it's time to share, and keep making sure that we're encouraging those skills and working on those skills even when they're having bad days and bad weeks can be beneficial for that child to grow and establish positive routines in their life. And so you see that next week, much better week, and he bounced right back. So here's the post-assessment graph, and you can see the growth that took place. So the dark blue is the pretest. Then you can see during week 2, that's the lighter colored blue, the growth that took place. Week 3 is the darker green, and that one always makes me laugh when I look at the sharing, because we had a big growth and then not so big growth. And then also rules and respect, a little bit. I think probably the sharing and the rules and respect obviously tie hand in hand. So we were a little defiant that week, and it is what it is. And we just encouraged and bounced right back the next week. So the data analysis, I am very much a visual person. Again, I spoke at the beginning a little bit about who I am, why acceleration is important to me. I'm very much a visual learner. I'm very much an accelerated learner. I need to have 15 things happening in my life at all times or I'm bored. And then I create things that don't need to be created. So for me, my brain very much leans towards a statistical standpoint. And my father was a teacher, and I struggled with math tremendously. Accelerated. And then somewhere between 8th and 9th grade, was bored and checked out and missed some crucial pieces in math. And so my dad was not a proponent of advancing me because he wanted me to have a social and emotional environment of peers my own age, even though I was thought much older than a lot of my peers and was much more mature than many of my peers. And so my parents thought outside the box. And so I remember struggling with statistics, struggling with understanding a statistics class in 10th grade, and was getting frustrated, and I was getting to the point of frustration where I had never felt dumb before, and so I just wanted to quit, shut down, I'm done. And my dad took me one night after basketball practice, and we started driving north, which we lived south of my school, and I didn't know what was happening. And he goes, I want to show you something. And so he took me up and took me to the racetrack here in Iowa. And he said, if you can not really bet, but bet the next 3 races, if you can figure out the winners of the next 3 races, there's $20 on the table for you. And of course, I'm taking the $20 because I need gas money and food money and all the other things that a almost 16-year-old kid thinks she needs. So I sat there and figured out the next however many races and figured out who was going to win the race. And I was so proud of myself when I got done. And my dad goes, you just did statistics. And everything clicked in that one moment. It clicked. And that's what I want to be for students. So this is how my brain works. This might not be how your brain works. So I'm going to try to explain what I did here. So I did a t-test. And I knew I had 2 equal samples, equal variances, because I used the same test, but a pre versus a post. But I still asked the same questions. I set my alpha level at 0.05. So that's my confidence. And that's the kind of the margin of error per se. And when I ran this test, the 2-tailed p-test, so it's the second one from the bottom, right here, was a 0.07. So anything greater than a 0.05 shows significant growth. So I knew that when I was done with this and done with all of the data and collected all of the data, that this child had shown significant growth during this period. So I was really excited to break down this data and really see how my interventions and what we did over this 3-week time period had paid off. So I kind of told you about what the interventions were and what I used, but in this area I want to talk about why. Why did I use Play-Doh, sand, and fine and gross motor skills? According to the NAEYC, in an article titled Play-Doh Power, it talks about why Play-Doh is important and how to use Play-Doh differently and manipulatives for learning. So reading about this, you're using both sides of your brain. You're using fine and gross motor skills to roll the Play-Doh out and manipulate it into a shape or a letter. But you're also manipulating it into a shape or a letter and connecting both sides of your brain. So reading about interventions by matching, reading about interventions from Hanu Interventions, a website that specializes in interventions, it talked about how important matching and physically moving pieces is when you identify shapes and colors. So moving two objects together or pulling two objects apart, that helps to solidify when things are the same or when they're different. Playing games to learn and count and practice counting is another intervention strategy that I used. And we can use these, and we know that these work because we know children learn by doing. Using their bodies to count is one way children can learn. And another intervention strategy that I put in place was patterns. Clapping patterns, pattern cards, stories that involve patterns. One of the stories we read had clouds and rain. And so on the first day it was raining, on the second day it was raining, on the third day there was sun, on the fourth day it was raining, and then having them go through and put pattern cards. Another fun one that we've done is we're going on a bear hunt. We're going on a lion hunt. We're going on a shark hunt. And the kids come up with all the shark one, we had to make that one. We make pictures. And then the fun part is it's a pattern. You don't think it's a pattern until you get to the end. And then you have to reverse and flip and go backwards through the pattern. That's learning about patterns, which is really cool. And the kids don't know they're doing it, but they are. So my research findings. What the data says. There was significant growth during this time. So it showed that growth happened. The child grew. And the acceleration did not hurt them socially or emotionally or academically. They interacted more with the peers of a different age. At the beginning, they didn't interact at all. By the end of it, they were contributing to conversations and helping their peers to fix problems. And they had cognitive growth in all areas. So it showed they were able to figure out how to fix their problems and figure out how to communicate and help others when learning in the classroom. So the conclusion. After completing this project, was my hypothesis proven or disproven? Was there a significant difference? Was the child emotionally affected positively or negatively? And what about the other students? So after completing this project, looking at the data and determining whether this is a viable method of learning for accelerated students, I've concluded that these interventions made a significant difference in the learning of the child. Working on new strategies and accelerating the learning was beneficial for the child and proved to have helped develop many new skill sets. The strategy worked well, and the time that was taken to work with the student was significant. I think with finding adequate time to work individually with the student would be a hindrance for teachers and for staff. With longer periods of time working with the child more and integrating into the classroom, I could see this as being successful and will not need much guidance and attention individually. So as you integrate more and you implement more, you would be able to step back and really see the whole picture and view what's happening. I thought the child adjusted very well emotionally. They were very shy at the beginning, but at the end they opened up, they talked, they contributed, and the other students accepted them into the classroom. Academically, there was significant growth, and after giving both the pre and post, we were able to come up with an adequate intervention plan that helped the student to be successful. So the significance. How did this affect my life? The implementation was fairly easy. Going in, having enough strategies and enough learning targets, and working one-on-one or with a couple individuals in small groups was pretty easy to implement. The implications of the study, I was able to see growth. I was able to see children learn from one another. I was able to see a younger student come in and flourish in a classroom of older students, while those older students helped that younger student, and vice versa. And what this translates for learning. So, if schools could establish just one or two individuals that would enter classrooms that have students that are accelerated or need acceleration, coordinate that with the teacher, and create interventions, that would take so much stress off that teacher and allow her to step back and see the whole picture again. We have programs for 3rd and 4th grade, talented and gifted. Many of those are pull out of the classroom classes. But what if we implemented that in a 4-year-old preschool class where we pushed in interventions and accelerated? Those within the classroom would all benefit. Not just that one student that's being accelerated, but also the other students within the classroom. So recommendations for future study. How can I make this better? I would recommend first extending the amount of time spent in the classroom. Longer periods of time. For a young kid, it was really easy to adapt to a new person. But for older children, they may be more leery, and you wouldn't see a true reflection of what they really know during just a couple days of time. Determining intervention strategies. Not all children respond to the same intervention strategies, and they don't respond day to day. Some respond well on Monday, and by Tuesday they're bored with that intervention strategy. So having multiple intervention strategies that lend towards the same skill would be important. I felt like I had to go back to the drawing board multiple times because I didn't know the child well enough to come up with intervention strategies that worked. And then observe them in their natural play so I could see what their likes and dislikes are. It wouldn't be beneficial to have a patterning game about cows if the child had never seen a cow before. And the final recommendation I have would to bring multiple children into the classroom that need acceleration. This would allow for students to form multiple collaborative teams and work with students from different backgrounds and skills. All parties would benefit from this because they would grow their relationships. As students who require acceleration learn from older students who may have mastered that skill or have a firm understanding of that skill, the older students who are teaching that skill are also learning how to drill down and solidify their knowledge in that skill, which is a higher level thinking. So in that case, it's a win-win for every party. And this is a short clip from an intervention that I would have done with these students, but this is an intervention that I did with my daughter, who's a 3-year-old, and we are working on preschool strategies with her. Oh, goodness. That's okay, Mommy will get it. So you can see she's rolling out the Play-Doh. Can you roll out the middle? That's okay. Just pinch it back together. We're talking about spatial relationship and middle. Let's roll out the middle so then they can have more. Okay. Oh! Spread it out. There you go. Okay. Oh, that's alright. We'll put it up here. Okay. Now can you connect it one right here to it? It was really long, so it was making it really hard. Good. I don't think you need that much. That is stuck to the paper. So we want some bigger pieces. Can you take a bigger piece into it? Thank you. I think working with your own children is much harder than working with any other children. Because they're so comfortable with you. But this was a really fun activity to do. It will? Oh, goodness. Can you roll it into a long snake?
No, it doesn't go into a long snake.
Okay. Now one more, because this has a piece that looks like this over here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to let you roll that, and I'm going to help you with your number 2s, okay?
No, I want to by myself.
You're going to by yourself. Did you make the number 2?
Yeah, right.
Are you 2 years old?
No.
You're not 2 years old anymore?
3 years old.
You're 3 years old? Oh my goodness. Okay, how many number 2s did I draw for you on that board?
2.
Can you trace those for me?
Yeah.
No, not erase them. Trace them with your marker. Can I help you with that? Your jewel fell off?
Hey, no, it goes to that one.
It goes right here? Yeah. Okay. Can you copy over Mommy's number 2s?
Yeah.
Start up here. That's all right. Slow down. There you go. End at this dot. Great job. Can you try this one over here?
Yeah,
now
I want to make 2 numbers.
Okay.
I want to make 3 numbers.
Okay, you can do one on your own. Can you go very slow, okay? Oh, great. Great job, Lou. Are you going to make your own number 2 now? Okay, make your own number 2 down here. Great job!
No.
Oh. Okay, so that kind of just solidifies that kids are sponges. She knew at the end of that video when she erased it, you know, she made a scribble because she was having fun, but then when I told her great job, she knew immediately she didn't make the number 2, and so she went back and worked really hard on trying to correct that number 2. I really appreciate you listening to my presentation and everything that I talked about, and I hope that you can go back into your classrooms and form some kind of acceleration team or idea, some intervention strategies, because a lot of times I think we focus on the students that are getting behind and we forget those students that are ahead that might be bored and zoning out or missing out on instruction. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.